The moon hung low, casting a pale light across the deserted alley, its glow tinged with a sense of dread. The silence of the night was broken by the sharp echo of footsteps, each one heavier than the last. Detective Elena Martinez walked toward the crime scene, her breath visible in the cold, crisp air. Her mind raced with questions, but none of them could prepare her for what awaited. The body had been found only hours before, but already the signs of foul play were evident. The victim, a prominent local businessman, had been left in the middle of the alley, his body surrounded by a strange, cryptic symbol drawn in blood. The scene was meticulously staged, as though someone wanted to send a message. Martinez felt a chill crawl up her spine. Who would do this? And why? The city had always been a place of secrets, but this was something darker, something personal. As she stepped closer, her eyes locked on the victim's face, and a realization struck her. She knew this man. He was someone she had crossed paths with in the past, a man with too many connections and too many enemies. But what could drive someone to murder him in such a public way? Martinez clenched her fists. This was only the beginning, and she would stop at nothing to uncover the truth, no matter where it led her. Elena's mind raced as she pieced together the unsettling elements of the crime. The symbol wasn't random. It had been meticulously drawn, as if someone was trying to communicate something. Her pulse quickened, the realization dawning that this wasn't just a murder, it was a message. She had seen symbols like this before, but never so deliberately used in such a grisly setting. Her instincts told her this was no ordinary case. The victim's connections to the city's most powerful figures only added layers of complexity. As Elena walked away from the scene, the night air seemed colder, and a sense of dread gnawed at her. Was she walking into something far more dangerous than she had anticipated? She had worked hundreds of cases, but this one felt different. The mystery was deeper, the stakes higher, and the danger felt closer than ever. Something told her that in uncovering the truth, she might just be risking her own life. But she had no choice. She was too far in, and the case was calling her forward. The next morning, Elena sat at her desk, the early sun casting a pale light across her office. A cup of cold coffee sat untouched in front of her as she reviewed the case file. The victim, Marcus Langley, was well known in the city. His business empire had grown through murky deals, but he had a reputation for being untouchable. Yet here he was, dead in a back alley, his blood marking a cryptic symbol that was still haunting her thoughts. Elena's gut told her this wasn't a simple robbery gone wrong. This was deliberate, a message meant to be received, but by whom? She clicked through the file's photographs, pausing at one of Langley with a prominent local politician. The connection between Langley and the city's elite was undeniable, but that wasn't enough. What had driven someone to orchestrate such a public murder? The symbol was key. There was something more, a pattern buried beneath the surface. As Elena glanced at the clock, she knew time was slipping away. She would need to dive deeper into Langley's life, find out who stood to gain from his death, and who had the means to make a statement like this. The pressure was mounting, but she had never been one to back down. The investigation led Elena to Langley's office building, towering and imposing, its glass windows reflecting the city's sprawling skyline. Inside, she met with Langley's assistant, a nervous woman in her early 20s, who was clearly shaken by the news of his death. He was a good man, the assistant stammered, her voice cracking. He didn't deserve this. Elena could sense the fear in her words. There was something the assistant wasn't saying, but Elena knew how to press without seeming too aggressive. She asked about the people Langley had been meeting with in the days leading up to his death. The assistant hesitated before reluctantly mentioning one name, Christopher Vaughn, a real estate mogul who had recently crossed paths with Langley in a high-stakes deal. The assistant claimed Vaughn had a heated argument with Langley just a week before the murder. Was this the key to unraveling the mystery? Elena needed to meet Vaughn. The pieces were starting to fall into place, but she knew better than to rush in blindly. She had to be strategic, careful, and most importantly, patient. Elena's meeting with the assistant provided a crucial lead, Christopher Vaughn. That afternoon, Elena drove through the streets of the city, the weight of the case pressing down on her chest. Vaughn's mansion was on the outskirts, a sprawling estate that seemed to stand apart from the rest of the city, a symbol of his power. As she approached the front gate, the grand architecture loomed in front of her, all sharp angles and expensive materials. Elena was ready to confront him, but she couldn't shake the feeling that she was walking into a lion's den. Vaughn was known for his ruthless business dealings, and his name had been tied to several controversial projects. If he had been involved in Langley's death, this could be the moment everything changed. Elena stepped out of her car, her heels clicking against the pavement as she walked toward the door. She was calm, poised, ready for whatever lay ahead. But as the door opened, Elena realized the answers she sought might not come as easily as she hoped. Elena stood before Christopher Vaughn's mansion, the gates slowly creaking open. The air had thickened with tension as she was greeted by his assistant, a tall, stoic man in his early 40s. The large estate loomed ominously in the background, its grandeur nothing short of intimidating. Vaughn himself had been notified of her arrival, but Elena was ready to face him head-on. The man was known for his volatile nature, having risen to prominence in the city through questionable means. Elena was no stranger to those who hid behind wealth and influence, but Vaughn felt different. He had connections that reached the very top, and his power had a far-reaching influence on local politics. As she was led through a large marble hallway, Elena couldn't help but sense the weight of the secrets buried here. She could feel his presence even before the door opened. When Vaughn finally emerged, his cold eyes met hers. His smile, though polite, didn't reach them. "Detective Martinez, I've heard a lot about you," he said, his voice smooth, almost too perfect. Elena could already feel the manipulation starting, but she wasn't backing down. "Let's get to the point," she replied, locking eyes with him. "I'm here about Marcus Langley, and you're going to tell me everything you know." The moment Elena stepped into Vaughn's office, she knew this would not be a simple interrogation. The room was grand, with rich mahogany furniture, a large glass window framing the view of the city below. Vaughn gestured for her to sit, but Elena remained standing. Her eyes scanned the room, taking in every detail, every possibility. Vaughn's eyes never left her as he spoke. "I'm sure you're here because of the rumors surrounding Langley's death," he said, his voice calm, composed. "But you'll find that I had nothing to do with it." Elena raised an eyebrow. She had heard this before, the innocent-sounding defenses that concealed a web of lies. Vaughn's nonchalance only deepened her suspicions. The assistant had already mentioned their heated argument a week prior, but Vaughn denied everything with practiced ease. Still, Elena knew something was being left out. She had a feeling that beneath the polished exterior, there was more to the story. The pieces were beginning to fit together, but the puzzle wasn't complete yet. She needed more. After the tense exchange with Vaughn, Elena's instincts told her to dig deeper. She couldn't shake the feeling that he was hiding something. His smooth words and confident demeanor were all too calculated. As she left the mansion, her mind whirred with possibilities. Vaughn was too perfect, too composed for her liking. She couldn't trust him, not yet. But there was a thread, his connection to Langley's last deal, and the real estate mogul's mysterious influence in the city's political circles. She decided to visit a local journalist who had once reported on the shady deals between Langley and Vaughn. Maybe this journalist knew something that could tie Vaughn to the crime. After a brief conversation, the journalist handed her a file, thick with information. As Elena skimmed through the pages, she found evidence of a recent deal gone wrong. Vaughn was reportedly furious after Langley reneged on an agreement. That could explain the motive. But was it enough? Elena needed to verify this information, and she had just the person in mind. Back at her office, Elena pored over the file the journalist had handed her. There it was, a trail of broken promises, financial discrepancies, and a dangerous deal that had soured between Vaughn and Langley. As she pieced the puzzle together, one name kept resurfacing: a former business associate of Langley's who had gone into hiding after a messy fallout. Elena reached out to her contact in the city's underworld, someone who might know where to find this associate. The hours stretched into the evening, and Elena's patience was wearing thin. Finally, a lead came through. The associate was holed up in a rundown apartment on the outskirts of the city. Elena didn't hesitate. She gathered her gear and headed out. The pieces were coming together, but the truth was still elusive. As the city lights flickered outside her car window, she couldn't shake the feeling that the real danger was just around the corner. Elena arrived at the apartment complex, the building's broken down exterior barely visible in the flickering streetlight. She didn't expect the associate to be willing to talk, but she had no other choice. She moved through the hallways with practiced stealth, her footsteps muffled by the peeling carpet. When she reached the door, she hesitated for only a moment before knocking. The door creaked open, revealing a disheveled man in his late 40s, his eyes darting around nervously. Elena wasted no time. "I'm here about Marcus Langley," she said, her voice low but firm. "I need to know everything." The man recoiled, his face pale as the weight of her words sank in. I didn't mean for it to go this far," he stammered. Elena stepped inside, the door closing behind her with a soft thud. The conversation that followed would reveal the missing link, the final clue she needed. The following days blurred together as Elena dug deeper into the case, piecing together the fragments of Marcus Langley's life. The more she learned, the more she realized the complexity of the web he had been tangled in. Vaughn's association with Langley was only the surface of a much darker story. Elena's investigation led her to a former colleague of Langley's, a man named Richard Finn. Finn had once worked for Langley's real estate empire, but had mysteriously disappeared after a failed project. Elena's intuition told her that Finn held the answers. After tracking him down to a secluded cabin on the outskirts of town, Elena arrived, her car's headlights cutting through the dense fog. Finn wasn't an easy man to find, but Elena's persistence had paid off. As she stepped out of the car, her boots sank slightly into the wet ground, the fog swirling around her. The cabin looked abandoned, but Elena knew better than to let her guard down. Finn had been elusive for a reason, and the truth wasn't going to be easy to extract. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for the confrontation ahead. Elena approached the cabin cautiously, her hand resting on her gun holster. She knocked firmly on the door, the sound echoing in the stillness of the night. After a long pause, the door creaked open slightly, revealing Richard Finn. His face, gaunt and worn, peered through the crack. "I told you, I don't want any visitors," he muttered, his voice rough from years of self-imposed isolation. Elena didn't flinch. "I'm not here to ask for your help, Finn. I'm here to get answers," she said coldly. Finn hesitated, then opened the door fully. He was clearly nervous, but there was something else behind his eyes, fear, guilt, and perhaps something more. As he led her inside, Elena could sense he was holding back. He wasn't just afraid of being found. He was terrified of what would happen if the truth came out. Sitting across from him at a rickety wooden table, Elena wasted no time. "What happened to Langley?" she asked, locking eyes with him. Finn swallowed hard, then spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. "You have no idea what you're dealing with." As Finn finally spoke, his words confirmed what Elena had feared. Langley had been involved in something far worse than anyone had imagined. Langley was dealing with people who had no morals, Finn admitted, his voice cracking. There were deals, illegal deals, things that could ruin lives. He was in too deep, and he knew it. Finn explained that Langley had recently become entangled in a massive money laundering scheme, involving some of the most dangerous people in the city, including Vaughn. As he recounted the details, Elena's mind raced. She had been right. Vaughn was hiding something far darker than anyone had realized. Langley had tried to pull out of the deal, but it was too late. The consequences had been far-reaching, and Langley's decision to back out had sealed his fate. Vaughn didn't just want money, Elena. He wanted power, and Langley was in his way. Elena leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. "Who else was involved?" she asked. Finn's gaze dropped to the floor. You don't want to know, he whispered. Elena left the cabin with a newfound sense of urgency. Finn's confession had opened a door to a much larger conspiracy, and now she was more determined than ever to expose the truth. She had enough to go on now: Vaughn's involvement, the money laundering scheme, and Langley's betrayal. But the question remained: who else was involved? Elena couldn't trust anyone in the circle Vaughn had created, not even the people in positions of power. She had to tread carefully, knowing that every move she made would be watched. As Elena returned to the city, she knew her next step was clear. She needed to confront Vaughn. He was the key to everything. But she needed undeniable proof before she could bring him to justice. The city felt different now, as if it was closing in around her, each street a reminder of the danger lurking beneath the surface. The clock was ticking, and Elena couldn't afford to waste any more time. The confrontation with Vaughn was inevitable. Elena had gathered the evidence she needed, and now it was time to face him. The meeting was set for the following morning at Vaughn's office, the same place where she had first met him. As Elena walked into the building, her heels clicking against the marble floor, she could feel the weight of the situation bearing down on her. Vaughn was waiting for her in his office, as calm and collected as ever. I assume you've come to accuse me of something, detective, he said with a smirk, his voice dripping with arrogance. Elena didn't waste any time. You're involved in Langley's death, and I have the proof to bring you down, she said, her tone unwavering. Vaughn's eyes flickered with surprise, but he quickly regained his composure. You think you have me cornered, don't you? He said, standing from his desk. You're playing a dangerous game. Elena's gaze was steady. The game is over, she replied. The tension in Vaughn's office grew thick after Elena's bold statement. Vaughn smirked, but the flicker of uncertainty in his eyes betrayed him. You don't have the proof you think you do, he sneered, leaning back in his chair. Elena remained calm, her gaze unwavering. I have everything: the money trail, the witnesses, the motive. Vaughn's expression shifted, his mask cracking. You have no idea who you're dealing with, he warned, his voice low. But Elena was resolute. She had known this moment would come, and she was prepared. As Vaughn tried to backtrack, Elena pulled out a thick folder filled with evidence, images, documents, and transcripts that linked him to the crime in ways he hadn't anticipated. This is just the beginning, she said. You're finished, Vaughn. It's only a matter of time before the rest of the city finds out what you've been hiding. His face went pale, but his arrogance remained. We'll see about that. The next few hours passed in a blur as Elena coordinated with the police to gather more information on Vaughn's associates. But as they dug deeper, new revelations began to emerge. Elena was alerted to a security breach at the evidence locker. Someone had attempted to destroy key pieces of the case. The realization hit her hard. The stakes had just escalated. Someone inside the force was involved, and they were trying to cover their tracks. Elena's heart raced as she tried to make sense of it. Was Vaughn's power so great that even the law was compromised? She couldn't trust anyone now, not even her closest colleagues. Days had gone beyond just a murder. It had become a war for control. As she prepared to confront the mole within the department, Elena couldn't shake the feeling that the net was tightening around her. The city was a web of lies, and she was tangled in it. Elena had to act quickly. She tracked down Officer Daniels, a fellow investigator she had worked with on past cases. The moment she entered his office, she could feel the tension between them. Daniels, she said, keeping her voice steady. I know someone inside is leaking information. I need your help to figure out who it is. Daniels shifted uncomfortably in his seat. I don't know what you're talking about, he replied, but his voice cracked. Elena studied his face. Don't lie to me, Daniels. I'm running out of time, and so are you. The silence between them was deafening. Daniels fidgeted with the papers on his desk, clearly struggling. I didn't want this to happen, he whispered, finally breaking. Vaughn. He has people everywhere. They've got leverage on us. It's too late to back out now. Elena's heart sank. The web was far more intricate than she had thought. Daniels had been compromised. But now there was a chance to flip him. With Daniel's reluctant confession in hand, Elena knew her next move had to be strategic. She couldn't afford to make another mistake. The evidence was mounting, but Vaughn's network ran deep, and one wrong step could cost her everything. As she headed to the courthouse to secure a warrant, Elena's phone buzzed. The message was simple. "We know what you're doing." A chill ran down her spine. The warning had come too late. They were watching her every move. Elena quickly turned around and headed back to her car, the streets outside feeling more dangerous than ever. She had no time to waste. Every second counted. The city was a powder keg, and she was standing in the middle of it. But she had no choice. She had to bring Vaughn down before his empire engulfed everything in its path. The battle was about to turn into a race against time. As Elena raced to gather the final pieces of the puzzle, she knew the stakes were higher than ever. The city's underbelly was beginning to rise against her, and there was no turning back. She had gathered all the evidence she could, and it was time to make the final push. The plan was risky, but it was the only option left. Elena set the trap. An undercover operation to expose Vaughn's inner circle. She briefed her team, each one knowing the danger they were walking into. The hours leading up to the operation felt like an eternity, but Elena was resolute. She wouldn't let Vaughn get away with it, not after everything he had done. As the team assembled at their staging point, Elena couldn't help but feel a pang of doubt. Would they make it out alive? Would the operation succeed? The silence was broken only by the sound of distant sirens and the steady hum of the city at night. The night of the operation had arrived. Elena stood at the edge of the abandoned warehouse, her heartbeat sensing with the pounding rain. The trap was set, and Vaughn's associates were about to walk straight into it. Elena's team was ready. Each member knew their role, the risks, and the stakes. She couldn't afford to fail. As she checked her equipment one last time, she ran through the plan in her head. The team would infiltrate the building from 3 different points. They had limited time before Vaughn realized something was wrong. Elena's mind raced through the possibilities, knowing that even the smallest misstep could result in disaster. Her phone buzzed. It was a message from the informant. "They're coming." A rush of adrenaline coursed through her veins as she relayed the message to her team. "Move in, now." She felt a momentary flicker of doubt, but she shook it off. This was it, the final push to take Vaughn down. The operation was in full swing. Elena's team moved like shadows, silently taking control of the building. Every creak of the floor, every distant sound, heightened the tension. Elena's pulse quickened as they approached Vaughn's private office. This was the heart of the operation, where the mastermind himself would be. As Elena crept closer to the door, she felt the weight of the moment press down on her. This wasn't just about taking down a criminal. It was about sending a message to everyone who thought they could operate above the law. She motioned for her team to hold position before silently entering the room. The office was grand, the walls lined with expensive art and bookshelves. Elena's heart pounded in her chest, but she was focused. The door creaked open, and there he was, Vaughn, sitting calmly at his desk, seemingly unaware of the storm brewing just outside. "Freeze!" Elena shouted, her voice cutting through the silence. Vaughn looked up, his face betraying a brief flicker of panic. "You think you can do this?" he sneered, standing slowly, his hands raised in mock surrender. "You're making a huge mistake, detective." Elena didn't flinch. "The mistake was yours, Vaughn," she replied, her voice steady and cold. As Vaughn moved to reach for something beneath his desk, Elena's team sprang into action, surrounding him. Tension was unbearable. Vaughn's every movement felt like a countdown. Elena stepped closer, her eyes never leaving his. "This ends tonight," she said. Vaughn scoffed, but the fear was evident in his eyes now. Elena had won. The investigation, the danger, it had all led to this moment. Vaughn was handcuffed and led out of the building, but Elena couldn't shake the feeling that the job wasn't done. There were still so many unanswered questions. Who else was involved? Who had been pulling the strings behind the scenes? As Vaughn was driven away in a police van, Elena stood on the steps of the warehouse, watching him disappear into the night. It felt surreal. After all the months of investigation, the long nights, the near misses, it was finally over. But Elena knew that the victory was only partial. She'd taken down one of the biggest criminals in the city, but the system that had protected him remained. Elena had exposed the rot, but she would have to keep fighting to make sure it was eradicated completely. Back at her apartment, Elena stared at the case file spread out before her. Vaughn was behind bars, but the weight of the case still hung heavy. She had exposed one criminal, but the corruption went deeper than anyone had realized. Elena sighed, knowing that her fight was far from over. As the city lights flickered outside her window, she could feel the lingering tension. The silence was broken only by the faint hum of the traffic below. Elena had won a battle, but the war for justice was just beginning. She closed the file and turned off the lights, her resolve stronger than ever. She wasn't done. She would keep fighting until every last piece of the puzzle was uncovered. After weeks of digging into the corruption network, Elena had reached a crossroads. Vaughn's arrest was just one piece of the puzzle, but the deeper connections to powerful city figures still loomed large. Elena sat at her desk, surrounded by a growing mountain of evidence, her mind racing. She had uncovered some key names, but she needed something more, a smoking gun to expose the full extent of the corruption. With the case files open in front of her, Elena traced the connections between the people who were still untouchable. As the weight of the conspiracy began to sink in, Elena knew that if she didn't act fast, these powerful figures might find a way to bury the truth. She had no choice but to push forward, even if it meant risking her career, or worse, her life. The city wasn't going to change overnight, but Elena had a plan. With each lead, the net was slowly tightening around those at the top. But time was running out. Elena knew she had to act fast. Her phone rang, and the voice on the other end confirmed her worst fear. Someone inside the police department was tipping off the criminals. "What?" "I've got the name," the informant whispered urgently. Elena's pulse quickened as she processed the information. The name belonged to someone high-ranking, someone with direct ties to both Vaughn's operations and the city's political elite. It was a shock, but not a surprise. Elena had been anticipating this betrayal, but she hadn't expected it to come so soon. She immediately contacted her trusted partner, Officer Daniels, but her gut told her he wasn't as innocent as he seemed. Was he the mole? Or was there someone else playing both sides? Elena's head was spinning as she prepared for the confrontation, but one thing was certain: she couldn't trust anyone now. The next morning, Elena met Daniels in a secluded cafe, her eyes scanning the crowd for any sign of danger. Daniels arrived, his face drawn and his demeanor uneasy. "You've got the name, right?" Elena asked, keeping her voice steady. Daniels nodded slowly, but something about his expression didn't sit right with her. He wasn't nervous, he was hiding something. As she looked into his eyes, Elena could almost see the guilt etched across his face. "Tell me, Daniels, what aren't you telling me?" Elena pressed. The silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken words. Daniels shifted in his seat. "I did what I had to do," he muttered, barely audible. Elena felt a pang of betrayal as he revealed his involvement with the corrupt officers, his role in feeding information to Vaughn's network. The truth hit her hard, but she couldn't afford to let her emotions take control. This was bigger than their past. This was about justice. Elena's world shifted as Daniels revealed the name of the mole, a high-ranking officer within the department. The truth was worse than she had imagined. The mole had been feeding Vaughn information for years, ensuring his empire stayed protected from the law. Elena couldn't believe what she was hearing. She had trusted Daniels, but the depths of the corruption were far greater than she had anticipated. As Daniels continued, Elena felt the weight of the revelation sink in. She was closer than ever to bringing everything down, but now, with the mole still on the loose, she couldn't be sure who was on her side anymore. She had one chance to take down the entire network, but she couldn't do it alone. "We're not done," she told Daniels coldly. You're going to help me take down everyone involved. He nodded, knowing there was no turning back. With the plan set in motion, Elena and her team prepared for their final operation. This would be the most dangerous move yet, but Elena had no choice. Vaughn's empire was too large, and too many lives had been destroyed. As the day of the operation drew closer, Elena reflected on how far she had come. She had uncovered so much: betrayal, corruption, murder, and yet the city still seemed unchanged. The fight for justice had cost her more than she was willing to admit, but the weight of the truth kept her going. In the end, it was all about taking down the system piece by piece. "It's now or never," Elena said to her team, her voice firm with resolve. They had the evidence, they had the team, and now they would make their move. No one was safe from the truth. The operation was underway. Elena stood at the forefront, her heart pounding as her team moved in swiftly. Every moment felt like an eternity. The stakes had never been higher. With Vaughn behind bars, Elena had exposed the heart of the conspiracy, but there were still threats lurking in the shadows. As the team secured key locations across the city, Elena's phone rang. A voice on the other end confirmed her worst fear. There was one last figure in the network who had been pulling strings all along. Elena had to act fast before this person disappeared, leaving them with nothing. She called for backup and prepared for the final confrontation. This would be the culmination of everything she had worked for: the truth, the justice. There was no turning back now. The search intensified as Elena and her team moved quickly to gather the last of the evidence. The city's underbelly was about to be exposed, but Elena couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. As they approached the location of the final target, Elena's instincts kicked in. Something wasn't right. The tension was palpable as the team moved in silently, their steps careful and deliberate. Elena took a deep breath, steadying herself. This was it. If they could capture the last key figure in the conspiracy, it would all be over. But as they entered the building, it was clear that the final showdown was about to begin. Inside the building, Elena's team split up, each member heading to different rooms to cover all angles. Elena's heart raced as she made her way to the top floor. She could hear the sound of her own footsteps echoing in the empty building. This was the moment she had been waiting for. She finally reached the door, the final confrontation ahead. She kicked it open, gun drawn, her breath steady. The target, another high-ranking member of the criminal network, was there, but so were armed guards. Elena's mind raced, assessing the situation. There was no room for hesitation now. She gave the signal to her team, and the room erupted into action. The confrontation unfolded quickly. Elena's team swiftly overpowered the guards, and the last figure in the criminal network was apprehended. As Elena stood over the captured man, she couldn't help but feel a mix of relief and satisfaction. The city had been saved, but at what cost? The battle had been long and grueling. Elena looked at her team, each member battered but victorious. The operation had succeeded, but the fight was far from over. This victory was only the beginning. The city would heal, but it would take time. Elena knew the journey ahead would be hard, but she was ready. Justice had been served. As the sun rose over the city, Elena stood on a rooftop, the cool morning breeze brushing her face. The battle was won, but the work wasn't finished. She had given everything for this moment, but it felt hollow. She had exposed the corruption, but there were still countless other battles to fight. Elena knew that, but she wasn't afraid. She had learned that even in the darkest of times, hope could still shine through. She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of everything she had achieved. With one last look at the city, Elena knew that justice would always be worth fighting for.